Hello, everyone. Today we are concluding our detailed review of this section regarding the recovery of juvenile species and various sustainable fishery products by commercial operators, local fishermen, and those involved in traditional small-scale coastal fishing. In other words, this refers to the specific categories of local fishermen who are currently active and present throughout your entire geographical area. In this final lesson of this particular section and this important topic, we are going to thoroughly discuss the critical recovery processes of various juvenile fish species. First of all, I want to make a preliminary remark about this. This biological recovery process can be achieved through the eggs, which these organisms also tend to lay, though not in all species, but it occurs especially when they are positioned on certain types of substrates found in their environment, rocky ones on algae. So for them as well, the discussion we've had so far applies that we've had up to now. However, it is abundantly clear that the entirely complete process then of farming, bringing them to a full commercial size, is a lengthy and complicated process. So regarding the challenges associated with fish populations, we have dedicated our efforts toward implementing a different strategic approach. This method involves the comprehensive recovery and restoration of these fish of small size. This is something we'll talk about in one of the next lessons. There are regulations that tell us the size limits for fish, above which size and at what specific length they can be legally caught and sold. Below that minimum length, they must not be caught. They shouldn't be caught, and in any case, they should be immediately released back into the water. But that's not always what happens. Moreover, beyond the stress, when these animals are captured, they can also be severely injured and they can suffer from physical wounds and trauma. And a significantly diminished capacity to protect and defend themselves in the natural surrounding environment. So even if you attempt to release them back in the sea, unfortunately, you cannot absolutely guarantee them a complete probability of survival. That is exactly the point. So furthermore, and this is a concept we will explore further in the next lesson, these specific sizes have their own unique significance. A size or a fish of a certain dimension, or even a specimen of a specific size, which varies from one fish to another fish in the population. This is a fish that has already reached its full biological maturity. From a strictly sexual point of view, that is, it may have reached the period in which it has already reproduced at least once. If I catch it at a smaller and younger size, it may not have reproduced yet. On this topic, there is another important subject we will discuss soon, which also concerns their physical size. The bigger they are, the more chances they've had to reproduce, the more numerous opportunities they've had to produce a greater number of eggs. So physical size is very important. There is always the constant desire to minimize these physical sizes and these overall dimensions from a regulatory point of view so that they could go fishing much more frequently. Something real that gives you a very immediate economic benefit, but causes you significant harm right after. To further expand upon our current discussion, we can also incorporate one more notable point, which is essentially the fundamental principle that the larger any given fish is in its physical size, the bigger it is in its total scale. As for its commercial value, the higher the market price will be. This is for two distinct and important reasons. One reason is driven by commercial interests. People and markets consistently demand much larger fish. Furthermore, there is also a much larger quantity of meat that can be readily consumed. You can get more food out of it. Moreover, as we will see, the bigger a fish is, the more significant its nutritional value compared to a smaller fish. So there are actually many different reasons why people aim for fish that are as large as possible. Obviously, for each individual fish, these specific sizes vary greatly from species to species. Now we will see an example that applies compared to all the other different species of fish. And it's an example that also concerns you, because today we are going to talk about a specific fish that in this area where we are is locally called the tube gournard, mazzolina, or pesce capot. It actually has many different names. It's a fish that has, as you can see, this color here and has fins that tend to spread out. They are very colorful, very beautiful. This helps it swim at exceptionally high speeds. Is a distinctive physical characteristic that also allows it to glide out of the water for a few meters and then return back into the water and swim again. It is almost as if it skims across the surface of the water, and this is a highly effective survival mechanism when it needs to evade and escape from the dangerous predators that are hunting it. As you can see on the right hand side, these are the ones we have in the Mediterranean Sea. They can also be found in the Atlantic Ocean. These other varieties, on the other hand, are found in the Red Sea and the vast Indian Ocean. And they are species that are also present in your geographic area. They all behave the same way. From a strictly reproductive point of view, and in terms of their entire life cycle and patterns of biological growth, these organisms behave in the same way throughout their lives. So this is a process that can be replicated. It is also harvested by artisanal fishermen. You can see the original photo. If you look over to your right side, do you see it there? There is a small boat equipped with a specialized cage hanging underneath, because sometimes it is very important to bring them back to the shore while they are still alive. They possess a significantly higher value this way, so when they are caught, they are immediately placed in these underwater cages. We have successfully utilized this specific method for our own professional purposes. And then they arrive at the market where they are still sold alive. So, what did we do? We started from this fundamental premise, from this innovative core idea, when at the very beginning, the local fishermen catch these specific fish. This applies to everyone. The Trevalisco applies to everyone, and it is a versatile method that can be used by all people. They catch these fish. If they are of a large or medium size and if they have commercial value, they sell them. Otherwise, they toss them back into the sea. These creatures often get caught in their fishing nets. They throw them back into the sea, but basically they are damaged, and so they do not always have a high survival rate, as we have clearly seen. The point we made was this: take these small and young fish, instead of just throwing them back into the vast open sea. Every single one of you standing here with us. Then it was finally completed. We managed to establish it as a functional port, operating as a fishermen's cooperative. It's as if it were your own BMU. Each BMU carried out its specific duties. This project, right here in this location, together with these local fishermen's cooperatives, the primary objective and vision was to ensure that these diminutive and undersized fish species, which didn't have much significant market or commercial value, instead of simply being released back. These often get caught in their small nets, so when they have to take them out, they pull them out and tear them apart in the process. And so they end up damaging them. We specifically told them that they must not damage these items and they absolutely should not throw them away. Instead, we asked them to hand them over to us and we will provide the support needed to help you raise them. Every single person had their own individual training. And when they finally reached a substantial physical size that was commercially interesting and that was economically significant, at that point you could effortlessly bring them to the commercial market for sale. This is exactly what we told them. However, the primary question they asked us was, but exactly what kind of nourishment should we provide for them? How much will it cost us? We have carefully made absolutely sure that all of this would cost you absolutely nothing, €0, well, and 0 shillings. How did we do it? First of all, we constructed and prepared several cages, and then at the active port, they have specialized management systems for certain technical installations made of durable plastic materials, which they use to transport fresh drinking water for washing. Basically, sometimes you really need to wash the wood boats. This system allows operators to perform thorough washing of industrial storage tanks, ensuring proper cleaning and maintenance for operational use. The very first section is a stiff and rigid plastic tube. This operates much like the infrastructure and systems that bring water into our homes every day. It is the same fundamental principle at work. So these are the construction materials they already had available right there on the site. Of course, we also bought brand new ones to finish this project. These are still exceptionally flexible, and we have officially started to make significant progress. We used these large round cages as our primary structure, which we then carefully covered entirely with a very fine protective mesh to seal them. It was crucial for the specialized mesh to be very fine to prevent these small and vulnerable animals from getting in or becoming entangled within the net, especially when they were young and could easily find themselves trapped or in danger and could easily get hurt. Then on the entire outer surface, it was also covered with a metal mesh to protect them from potential external predators as well. As a result, you see how it is structured. These are the structural joints of the human skeletal system, the systems that bring water into the houses. All of this extensive work costs a few dozen euros, 100 to 120 euros at most, €1. That's about 150 shillings. These are very large structures. Let's show when we were carefully assembling everything there at the port, right at that time. These particular specimens are significantly larger and more substantial in terms of their physical scale than the initial examples we observed earlier. Last time. These structures have a diameter of exactly 5 meters. In total, there are 7 plastic pipes put together, with 7 on the top layer and 7 on the bottom, along with additional pipes that keep them standing upright. They are approximately a couple of meters tall, perhaps reaching 2 or even 3 meters in height. The size can then be more or less large, depending on exactly how many animals I put inside. We will certainly take a closer look at this a bit later on. We also carefully observed exactly where we could strategically position them. The position we chose was a very particular and deliberate location. It is situated between 2 and 2.5 miles away from the coast. 13 to 15 meters deep. We placed them at the specific measurement of the underwater depth, which was the exact location where our team had previously positioned our equipment. Much weaker currents, because if I put them higher up there, the movement of the water could damage them. So they successfully carried out these detailed tests right here with us. The established union and all of the various dedicated local fishermen's cooperatives in the area collaborated directly. Here, and then while we were lowering them into the sea with a large sailing ship, and this was here there was a small narrow opening. You could carefully enter inside. A professional diver could enter to carefully extract some components to check if there were any technical problems or issues. There were 4 remarkably large and heavy. There were heavy concrete blocks, specifically numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4, which served as massive anchors that held it perfectly steady on the deep seabed, with thick industrial strength chains that allowed it to remain securely in place despite the underwater currents. With movement, they began to rise up just a little bit due to the buoyancy of the water. They weren't actually attached to the ground, or rather to the seabed, sorry, and even underneath there was a clear space, a bit of water flowing. You can really see these are very simple things. These are actually just water supply pipes. The initial items we acquired were extremely basic. We originally bought them for the project, but then they recovered this alternative material at the port location. Consequently, the other ones, the ones we had already made, we ended up giving away to various other people. Others were built, even much smaller ones, because then almost anyone who wanted to could easily make one on their own simply by using tanks. With these smaller cages, they can be either larger structures specifically made for a whole group of fishermen, or simple individual structures that each fisherman can carefully make for himself at home. These designs are highly practical and accessible for all the people involved. This is completely up to each person here. Everyone has their own fishing area and everyone puts it in their own area. Here at the bottom of the area, there was a hole containing a large, remarkably flexible plastic tube which measured approximately 10 to 15 centimeters in diameter and extended for a total of 13 to 15 meters in length. From this underwater position, the long tube reached all the way up to the surface of the sea, where it was securely tied to a brightly colored floating buoy. For what specific reason would we do it this way? It is because through this long hollow tube we would drop all the necessary food items down for these small fish. And there, basically, we raised the food and gave it to them ourselves. As they were caught, a professional diver would put them inside. We didn't just drop them through the tube, but instead we lowered them from above, right from the very top. The food was carefully lowered from the top of the tube, and we would monitor this closely. We would check everything to ensure it was right. How these fish were growing. These sturdy ropes were approximately a meter and a half long, and these heavy chains were also about a meter and a half in length, just to provide you with an extra bit of detail. And this entire setup was clearly marked with a bright buoy, including both the floating tube and the entire submerged cage below, for our own personal safety. Then we also strategically and carefully placed it near a local agricultural farm where there was also a local mussel farm, which was also clearly marked and visible. So boats wouldn't pass directly through there. We placed it right up against it so that this setup ensures it wouldn't get damaged by passing boats that might come to fish in the area and end up accidentally dragging everything away from the site. So what exactly did we have? What did we do? When they first came, first of all, we had some local fishermen bring us over, both the fishermen with their nets and the other various fishermen, the ones who were there, just as we refer to them, the amateur enthusiasts, meaning those fishermen who don't fish professionally but just go out from time to time to just to experience the joy of fishing. We would take them from the dedicated fishermen who caught them using the classic hook and line. Then they would carefully remove the hook and bring them directly to us. Obviously, these were high quality fish that had some very unique and specific characteristics that we needed to observe. They weren't in good health at all. They each suffered from some kind of injury. We carefully transported the specimens to our specialized research laboratories and had them thoroughly examined by a highly esteemed colleague of ours who is actually a professional ichthyopathologist, which is essentially a specialized fish doctor who studies aquatic diseases and health in great detail. They were really injured with large wounds. We did not even consider them because then there could have been, first of all, it was because they would not have survived for very long at all, and also because they potentially could have caused various infections, which in this small fish farm could also spread rapidly to the other fish. But instead, we actually used those samples to run detailed scientific analysis and other tests that I will tell you more about later on. The first thing we did was take them, check that they were healthy, and we also spoke with the fishermen. This activity appeals to both the highly skilled professional fishermen who work at sea, and those enthusiastic individuals who fish for the pure enjoyment and relaxation of the sport. So every now and then we see many amateurs or recreational fishermen, as they are often called, spending their time out on the water. This ensures that these delicate fish would come to us with very few injuries and be collected with a greater level of specialized care and attention. What we have clearly noticed is that the specific fishing tools our local fishermen generally use are exactly the same ones that we saw in our previous lessons. For fishing both the cuttlefish and sea machines, they actually don't work very well, because then the process of pulling them out, these tiny and delicate little fish, which are known as these mazzoline, being caught from deep inside the water means that many of them suffer from various physical injuries. On the other hand, for those captured using large industrial fishing nets or those caught with a hook by amateur fishermen, we have consistently seen that they maintain a significantly higher survival and health percentage. The overall state of being physically healthy and robust while remaining fully capable and ready to be utilized for its intended purpose. They tend to use nets much more frequently now, and let's just say that you really shouldn't have any major problems at all. Once they finally brought them in, first of all, we would carefully put them in a specialized water tank or perhaps in a very large bucket measuring about 100 to 150 liters. First, we would carefully add fresh oxygen, thoroughly check them, look closely at their total weight, see if they had any painful wounds. And when we finally had about 30 to 40 of them ready, we would take them and gently put them in place into small individual buckets, not nets, because then they are small buckets or cages with a very fine and delicate mesh, depending on the specific situation. But the buckets were the ones used better, the best option. A diver would go down, dive underneath, back to where they were placed, go down and carefully put them back in there. That was the usual standard procedure. That was the sequence of steps that was followed. All of this was clearly and absolutely essential to reach that final number. It really did not take a very large amount of effort. During the specific period when they were being caught, all the fishermen working together could get it done in a maximum of 2 or 3 weeks. But that's because we had these somewhat large cages, so we needed a lot of official permits, and that's exactly why we had this issue. Here, actually, these cages, as long as they're in a sheltered place, can even be placed closer together. And so you can really approach things differently in a manner that is distinctly different from anything we have previously observed in this context. Using these cages, we have developed a system that is significantly more practical and much more convenient for our daily operations. Previously, this specific aspect of our work was quite problematic for us, but in order to fully comply with the current regulations in place, we honestly had to do it this way here. They set up and constructed their dwellings as well along this particular direction, placing them in areas where they weren't fishing. We encountered some specific problems when placing them. All of this can certainly be done in a much more effective and organized way.